Something wicked this way comes. Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage absolutely lets there be some carnage, but it also totally does that thing that you really hoped it might do. Directed by Andy Serkis, this movie builds on the symbiote shenanigans setup in the first film and sends everyone's favorite man-eating alien parasite facing off with everyone else's favorite parasite, Psycho, before heading off in a totally different direction. We'll break all that down, plus we'll run down which symbiote the big guy could be forced to fight next if there is a Venom 3. But first, before we get into all of that, I have to warn you we're about to spoil the crap out of Venom 2, so if you haven't seen it yet, or you don't want to know, now would be the proper time to skedaddle up a building or something while we all figure this out together over here. Now that we're past the spoiler warning, we're going to get right into it. Very excited to say this. And Spider-Man appears in this movie, and Venom is in the MCU. Yes! Well, kind of. We think. Okay, so here's how. In the mid-credits scene, Eddie Brock is tired after fighting Carnage, which we'll talk about in a second, and Venom informs him that the symbiote is ancient and well-traveled. He specifically references having seen other universes in its lifetime. Then he says something like, "Let me show you some of the things we've seen." Then the screen goes black and Eddie wakes up in a much nicer hotel room, and on the TV we see J. Jonah Jameson outing Peter Parker as the web slinger in the same bit of video we saw at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. Okay, so one way or the other, as Eddie is watching JJ's report, he's in the MCU, or at least Sony's little corner of it. But how he got there is kind of vague, and we have a few theories, so stick with us on this. Like we mentioned earlier, Venom specifically mentions having seen other universes before Eddie wakes up, wherever he is. This could somehow be in this Venom's past, and he's showing Eddie a memory. If that sounds far-fetched, remember when Infinity Ultron just recently found out the rule of multiverses.
Oh, but anything is possible in a multiverse.
But there's another theory swirling around the IGN Slack channels right now that makes a bit more sense. The moment Eddie blinks into the MCU could also be the moment when Doctor Strange broke the whole multiverse in the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer. JJ's big Spider-Man exclusive that wrecked Peter's whole life was the thing Peter wanted Doctor Strange to erase, so the fact that we're seeing it again here is likely not a coincidence. Okay, so whatever this means, it's a huge freaking deal and super exciting, but it's also pretty disconnected from the events of the movie. So we'll break down how we think the MCU connection will play out in a minute, but first, let's recap real quick. So we open on a flashback origin story for Cletus Kasady. He was basically born a full-blown psycho who started offing family members as a kiddo, which leads him to being institutionalized and meeting Frances Barrison, aka Shriek, as a kid, and she is the only thing this serial killer seems to care about. Well, I mean, apart from the murder stuff, anyway. Fast forward to present-day San Francisco, and Eddie Brock is struggling to make sense of his life as a deadly superhero vigilante who eats people by night and print reporter by day. We've all been there. A print reporter who rides a Ducati and does wheelies all over the place. Whatever. While in prison at San Quentin, Cletus asks Eddie Brock to come visit him in prison for the exclusive rights to tell the life story of a notorious serial killer. Detective Patrick Mulligan pressures Eddie to, air quotes, find where the bodies are, and Venom, who is obsessed with being a superhero, helps Eddie crack the case and finds the bodies, which means Cletus gets convicted, sentenced, and fast-tracked to the death penalty. Cletus invites Eddie to his execution, and Eddie is stupid enough to get close enough for Cletus to bite him, and the symbiote begins to take hold. Cletus's execution was a death sentence, just not for him. Eddie, meanwhile, is dealing with some Spider-Man 2 type feels in that he'd really like to go back to living a normal life without a symbiote constantly controlling him all the time. And Venom really wants to be out on the streets of San Francisco eating bad guys. So at one point they break up. Eddie tries to go back to his old life, and Venom hops from random host to random host until Michelle Williams' character eventually reunites them just in time to fight an almost kaiju-sized Carnage and Shriek in the third act's big fight scene. And that fight is pretty awesome. A full-powered Carnage is really a sight to behold, and it really makes you wonder how could Spider-Man stand against him. Well, maybe we'll never get to find out, because Eddie kills and eats Cletus to end the fight, and Shriek seemingly dies after a huge church bell falls on her. And after Venom reabsorbs the Carnage symbiote, Eddie and Venom leave San Francisco to go do their thing somewhere else, and that's what leads us to that mid-credit scene that we were talking about earlier. So Marvel Studios is doing a lot of multiverse wheeling and dealing these days, and since the Disney acquisition of Fox, lots of fans figured they'd see X-Men or Fantastic Four appear in the MCU via Wanda/Sylvie/Doctor Strange's meddling with the multiverse, and they still may, but after the mid-credits scene of Let There Be Carnage, it appears that Venom has beaten them all to the punch and will be the first Marvel character controlled by another studio to appear in the MCU.
Eddie, we should be out there snacking on bad guys.
Look, Carnage's name is in this movie's title, and when he's on screen, it really is his movie. But real quick, this isn't a review. Be sure to check out IGN's full review, by the way, for a little bit more of a full-fledged actual review. But a little bit of opinion here. The Carnage action scenes in this movie absolutely rip. They kick ass. They're awesome. They're incredibly well done, and they're very exciting to watch. Anyway, Carnage seems to be driven by two main motivations in this movie. First, there's the whole murdering psychopath part, which is very much his brand, but second is his love for Frances, aka Shriek. He does refer to her as Shriek in the film, by the way, but they have a whole supervillain Bonnie and Clyde situation going on. They even get a cool car. In the end, both characters die, and the Carnage symbiote is again made one with the Venom symbiote, so who knows, maybe Carnage could reemerge one day, especially if the symbiote is this big amalgam of all the hosts who came before it. Cletus Kasady may be dead, but that doesn't mean we won't see Carnage return, and Shriek appears to die beneath the church bell, but we never see the body, and you know the rules when it comes to comic book movie deaths. Another important moment from the big fight at the end, it looks like Shriek is about to kill Detective Mulligan, but later in the fight we get a close-up of Mulligan and his eyes are glowing, and he's muttering about monsters. The whole vibe was very much like when Tim Blake Nelson's character, Samuel Stearns, expanded his mind and teased the villain, the leader, in The Incredible Hulk. That tease never paid off, or at least not yet, but this one could be setting up yet another symbiote villain for Venom to face off against if there's a Venom 3, and we'll get to that right now. Okay, so assuming that Venom 2 performs as well as Venom 1 did back in 2018, there's probably a pretty good chance that Venom 3 is somewhere on the horizon. This movie certainly assumes that much and lays some track for who Venom might need to fight and then devour in his future solo adventures, so here are the top candidates. First, frickin' Spider-Man, dude! Since Venom's first appearance in the 80s, the symbiote's whole story has been linked to the Wallcrawler, and ever since this version of Venom appeared on the big screen, fans have wondered, when are these two gonna fight? Spider-Man's appearance in this movie seems to assure that at some point in the future, Spider-Man No Way Home comes out in just a few months, and if the rumors are true, could include everything, a variant Spidey or Spideys, and a multiversal Sinister Six, and Venom. Spider-Man's appearance in Venom 2 seems to set something like that up. That's a lot. Anyway, the next candidate for Venom to fight in his next solo movie is TOXIN. Remember Detective Mulligan? Well, pulling from Marvel Comics, Detective Patrick Mulligan eventually becomes the first host for the symbiote, which itself is the offspring of Carnage. The fact that Cletus's lover Shriek seems to be the one who infected Mulligan also points to this. Carnage and Shriek made a little symbiote and bound it to Mulligan before Venom could reabsorb Carnage. Here's our guess. Venom will appear via Doctor Strange's multiverse incompetence, tangle with Spidey in Spider-Man No Way Home, and maybe even get his cool chest logo in the process. Then in Venom 3, he'll be back in San Francisco dealing with Toxin. Now, what we don't know is if that will be the San Francisco that we've seen in two Venom movies, or the MCU San Francisco where heroes like the Wasp, Ant-Man, and Shang-Chi could also be around to help. And of course, now it's time to run down the Easter eggs we found in this one. Ravencroft was featured in the trailer, but it is a pretty central location in this movie. Cletus spends time there, Shriek is basically in prison there for years, and by the end of the movie the whole place is burned to the ground. The Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane first appeared in Spectacular Spider-Man number 178 back in 1991, and also featured in 2014's Amazing Spider-Man 2, though that version seemed to be located in New York, and the one in this movie is in San Francisco. Maybe they have a chain of institutes for the criminally insane or something like that. Now, Venom, of course, he's why you're here. First appearing in 1984's Secret Wars as Spidey's black suit, the full symbiote version of Venom first appeared in 1988's Amazing Spider-Man. We also know Venom from a bunch of cartoons and video games and was solely responsible for this. Carnage first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man in 1992 and has also been a homicidal maniac in Marvel cartoons and video games before Woody Harrelson brought him to life in Let There Be Carnage, and the wig from the end of the first movie. Shriek first appeared in 1993's Spider-Man Unlimited #1 and has also appeared in animation and games. Detective Mulligan first appeared in Venom vs. Carnage in 2004, and this mother effer, or at least you should. I mean, if you don't, how did you make it this far into this video? What the? Anyway, what did you think of Venom 2? Is Venom part of the MCU now, and which deadly symbiote will Venom have to battle next? Let's hear your best theories down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this episode of Canon Fodder, and for more Marvel, here's what to expect from Loki Season 2, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.